What's up, guys? Ben Cary here, founder of CapWize. Joining me for a special college football week 0 breakdown. We have Rob Veno with Rob Veno Sports and Wager Talk. First and foremost, Rob, how you doing, man?
I am good today, Ben. Obviously, our first real weekend of college football, so exciting time for us.
Yeah.
Those of us in this industry know that basically from now until the end of March Madness, it's a no let up affair. But of course, we wouldn't be in this line of work if we didn't love it. So yeah, it's great to have football back. Last year, remember at this time, we were wondering, if we'd even have college football. So the fact that we have it is fantastic. So we're ready to break them down. I mean, the games are up on the board. They've been up on the board for a while. We've seen some movement, and people are anxious to get some wagers down on these games because there's been some movement.
Yeah, and that's a great perspective, right? I mean, we were think where we were last year, right? Like around this time. So very fortunate to have football back. It's one of my favorite times of the year, up there with March Madness, of course. But yeah, college football's back, and Rob's going to help me break down a few of these week 0 games. But Rob, before we hop on into the actual matchups and the numbers, let's talk about a few teams to watch for this season. Teams that maybe the market you feel like is undervaluing, and maybe a few totals that you like. So I'll let you take the floor first with maybe a team total that you feel like there's a lot of value on.
Well, I'll give you one that I've personally bet and I've banged the table for the better part of 6 weeks now, Ben, and that's out of the AAC, the SMU Mustangs. Um, this team, and I'll tell you the first thing that caught my eye was when they hired Jim Leavitt as
Mhm.
defensive coordinator. And it's an interesting situation because, as we know, when you go into these situations and you bring your system and you convert 4-3s into 3-4s or vice versa, it takes positional changes and it's difficult on the personnel. You have personnel recruited to one system, and then you have to teach defensive ends and outside linebackers, perimeter players, strong safeties, all to play different positions, right? So that's the situation that Levitt walks into here. He's a 3-4 coach.
Mhm.
But he's had, in the last 6 years, he's walked into 3 different 4-3 situations and turned every single one of them around. Colorado, which you're probably familiar
Yep.
with when he walked in there, he did a great job.
They had a
Oregon,
top. They had a top. I think 20 defense one of the years back 2016, I believe.
yeah, I mean, and he did it quickly. It
Yeah.
didn't take a lot of time to convert them out of that 4-3 into the 3-4. He went to Oregon, took over there for Brady Hoke, scrapped his 4-3, did the job. Went to Florida State, where Harlan Barnett had been the hire with a 4-2-5, and he had been, he's an experienced veteran DC out of Michigan State. After 2 games, got pushed aside for Jim Leavitt to, as an analyst, come in and install the 3-4, and Florida State got better. So this is a guy who can do it here as well. I like that hire right off the bat. Secondly, you got a great wide receiver like Reggie Roberson back. Bad leg injury to him last year.
Mhm.
Probably would be in the NFL right now if not for it. And they crushed the transfer portal, Ben. I mean, nowadays when we handicap college football, we have to handicap the transfer portal, right? It's
Have
crazy.
to. It's huge. I mean, it's changed. It's 100% changed the college football landscape.
This team in particular gets, their starting quarterback, Tanner Mordecai, comes from Oklahoma,
Hmm.
former 5-star recruit. They get an All American tight end from Oklahoma. Uh, I think that health wise, he's really good, Grant Calcaterra, this year. So should be on the field from what I read a couple of days ago. They get 7 Power 5 transfers in all. Oregon starting middle linebacker from last season. So, point here being that Sonny Dykes in Dallas now has begun to get people to come to this program. It's becoming I don't want to call it a destination spot, but if you're not getting Power 5, Sonny Dykes is getting
Yeah.
you there. The offense is good for it. Recruits love it. And defensively, if they get a little bit better, they're going to be in really good shape here. The schedule, Ben, I think was the final selling point, right? If you go through SMU's schedule, you go through the first 7 games, you're going to think that they're, or at least legitimately, they could be 6-1, which
Yeah.
means last 5 they've got to come up with one, and the back end of the schedule is loaded. It's a difficult road, but There's 3 games on there that are possibilities for SMU. They could outscore Central Florida at home. That's likely to be a barn burner. I'm not very high on Memphis this year. I think they could get a win over Memphis, or they could get the Tulane game or the Tulsa game. I forget which one it is. But it's 3 possibilities for 1 win to get you to 7. Unless major injury strikes here, Ben, I think SMU gets over. You can get 6 at a larger VIG, minus 150. I think some places have moved to the 6.5 now. You still have to get to 7 wins anyway. I like SMU over the win total.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think people may be scared when they look at the schedule, the back end of it, right? UCF, Cincinnati, Memphis, Houston. But like you said, they're going to be in a position where they may already be 5-1. And that, they just have to squeeze a win out against either Tulane or SMU. And there you go. So I like that a lot. That's a great look. Any others you want to mention? If not, we can just kind of hop on into week 0.
Yeah, real quick, I'll just say this. I played Tennessee under 6.5 wins. That's a team that got ravaged by the transfer portal. If you use places like 247 Sports, right, that will grade transfers. Tennessee lost like 7 of the top 25 guys. They just got raided by the transfer portal. Obviously, Josh Heupel coming in. It's a different system, and there's a lot of changes to take place anyway. But when you lose a lot of your best talent, significant talent, that doesn't help the situation any. You're in the SEC. I know the East isn't as strong this year, but still, Tennessee is bottom rung right now where SEC East is concerned. They're swimming uphill. So I thought 6.5 wins was an awful lot for them to get over. I don't see them as a 7-5 team. A 6-6 cashes your ticket. I like that. And very quickly, Ben, just from a weekly standpoint, because you mentioned maybe some underrated teams or maybe under the radar teams.
Yeah.
For those watching us or listening to us, I would recommend you take a strong look at Arkansas on a week-to-week basis. They're going to be an underdog. They're obviously picked last in the SEC West because the SEC West is so potent. But that's
I think the third toughest schedule
right.
Arkansas has, yeah.
And with that comes plus prices, and in all likelihood, pretty large plus prices. So I think Arkansas could be a point spread team, maybe in a 12-game season, get you to like 8-4. And I think East Carolina out of the AAC is one that's underrated. Going to be getting a lot of points in a lot of situations. I don't think they'll be favored in any more than 3 or 4 of their games. So, again, we're looking for teams that people don't want to bet that we think will cover spreads. We're not talking about straight-up wins with these 2 teams. We're talking about
100%.
Get us to the window, cash our ticket.
And it's just as important as total plays. I mean, if you have a mentality where you're like, well, maybe I don't want to bet there over for win total, but you get value in that first game, maybe even second game, it's essentially the same thing. You're just, betting it from a different angle. So, really good point there. That's a good team to watch for. So let's talk about some Saturday games. And
sure,
right off the bat, Rob, we got a juicy one. It's probably the biggest game, I guess, of this slate. It's a smaller slate, but Nebraska, Illinois. This is an interesting line because it did open up at 9.5, favoring Nebraska on the road, but now it's dropped down. I think I see a 6.5 in some spots, but for the most part around that 7 range, 6.5, obviously a key number of 7, but let's dive on into this one. Oh, and of course the total 55. What are your initial thoughts with the line move, what you're looking for in this one? And then, maybe your best bet.
Well, I think the initial line move, the push to Illinois, is a complete fade of Nebraska, right? I don't know that it's a play on Illinois. I think it's more of a fade. And remember that it's early money. So generally speaking, it's syndicate groups, guys that have been waiting for college football, what you would refer to as sharp money. I don't necessarily like the term, but that's what they refer to it as, sharp money.
Yeah.
It's not your average $20 bettor coming up and betting Illinois to push it from 9.5 down to 7. So looks to me like it's pretty much a fade of Nebraska for the simple point that Illinois changes their entire coaching staff, right? Brett Bielema in. Mm-hmm. With him comes a couple of new coordinators, Tony Peterson, Ryan Walters from Mizzou. So you would think that a team like that's trying to reestablish themselves wouldn't get that much money in week 1, especially against a Nebraska team where Scott Frost is on the hot seat. Scott Frost seems to believe that this is the deepest and most talented team he's had yet during his tenure. That stands to reason because I think 4 or 5 years now they should be ready to roll. But when you're not betting Nebraska, I think that speaks volumes of what people think of them. I would say this real quick, Ben, that Brett Bielema, when he took the job at Arkansas, we all know what he was at Wisconsin, right? When he took the job at Arkansas, the personnel left there for him wasn't really suited for his system. Again, college so much different than the NFL. You know, these guys coach different systems, and if it's recruited to a different style, it takes a couple of years to weed that out. Brett Bielema had 3 bowl games, but he wasn't overly successful at Arkansas. Finally got the boot out of there after trying a few things. Here he steps into a Lovie Smith-led team where really the personnel is better suited for him. It's not his entirely, and I'm sure recruiting classes he'll adjust, but there's a good running back room, strong offensive line, and we know what Brett Bielema wants to do, right? He wants to run the football. If we look at last year's game, Nebraska in Lincoln was a 16-point favorite, and they wind up losing by 18. 34-point difference between line and final, right? So now you're getting 7 points with the team that won by 18, and they're at home, Illinois is. So, again, there's value, another reason to be against Nebraska. I will point this out real quick. The 41-23 final last year also comes with a +5-0 turnover margin.
Yeah, I do remember that. That was I mean, they were like in, I think, red zone a few times. It was a disastrous game for them.
Yeah, and that you can't expect that to happen again. So
no.
We're not trying to say that they're going to win by 18 again because that +5 turnover margins just don't happen.
Huge.
But the fact is, Illinois has a veteran quarterback in Brandon Peters, right? They can run the football. They've got a couple of tight ends, so they can probably methodically move the clock and score some points here. Can Nebraska, flip the script that much and cover a 7-point number? I'm not sure. I would probably look to Illinois plus the 7, even though it's the coaching debut of Bielema. And as you mentioned, Big Ten divisional matchup right out of the chute. It's important for both sides here. And when we're handicapping these very first games, we always have to remember that if they want to, these head coaches, they can game plan all summer long for this first game. So, Illinois has been ready. Nebraska's been ready. I think Illinois +7. I think it's a closer game than this. So I think the initial line movement is correct. Illinois +7, probably the way that I would look.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me because initially when I saw that 10 open or 9.5, I just didn't have any interest. There are just too many question marks for me. And now, I hate to bring this into the equation, but I think we have to mention it. Mm-hmm. Nebraska does have some concerns off the field with some of the scandals with primarily how they were conducting their practices and did they, have any violations. The reason why I bring that up is I personally think if Nebraska is 100% focused in this one, I do believe they have the more talented team, but there's just so much concern on my end that they're not going to be ready to play because, watching a few games Nebraska play last year and then the first year of Scott Frost, I just don't think he's a good play caller, to be completely honest. And I just don't know if they can get the job done against Illinois. It's on the road. For me, I'm staying away from this one. I've thought about a 6.5 for Nebraska, but that would just be my lean, Rob. I'm not going to be betting this one. And the total, I do lean under 2 as well, but I think when it's all said and done, me personally, I'm not going to have any bets in this one.
And I think there are positives for Nebraska, Ben. We don't want to paint this as if it's all Illinois all the time because Adrian Martinez, the fact that Luke McCaffrey's out of there and you don't have to look over your shoulder anymore and it's your job and you go play 4 quarters, not, you did poorly in the first 2 series, you're coming out of the game. I think that helps Martinez.
All spring ball too, right?
All spring ball.
Yeah.
And that's important for everybody because remember, because of COVID last year, a lot of these spring practices never happened. So it's good to get back into that. They feature a couple of guys. Here's what, to me, and I'm interested to see this, Ben, is that the running back room will be somewhat dependent upon USC transfer Marquise Stepp. He's a bigger back, 6 foot 235 to go along with a couple of speed backs that they have. But he's going to be counted on for production. Transfer in. Let's see what he does. And at the wide receiving position, Samori Torre tore up the FCS All-American at Montana, and he's instantly Nebraska's #1. So does it translate to the Big Ten level? We're going to find out real quickly. If those guys are successful, that offense could take off for Nebraska this year.
Yeah, and this is the game that kicks it off. I'm sure this game has the biggest handle, I would guess, right, of all the games. I couldn't see how it doesn't, but the one that would come close to it, we can hop on into, is probably going to be Hawaii UCLA. Rob, I'm high on UCLA headed into the season, and I don't know if I should be as high on them as I am, but I do think they have a high upside. I will put it that way. Can they execute with Chip Kelly? I think this is his 4th season, I believe. It's either 3rd or 4th. I believe, Robinson and those guys have a lot of upside, but Hawaii is a team that I'm not sure what we're going to get out of them in this one. I'm showing a spread of up to 18 in some spots, minus 18 for UCLA. This open, Rob, at minus 11, which is pretty wild. We're seeing close to a touchdown worth of points on a line move, and then I'm showing a total of 68 for this one. So, Rob, what are your thoughts on this one, and what side are you leaning?
Yeah, there's a lot to break down here, Ben, as there is with all of these games. But let's just start with your initial thought that you're high on UCLA. And only because I'm of the same opinion. Chip Kelly, I think, has been branded since the day he left the Eagles as a guy who can't coach anymore. It was gimmicky at Oregon. He got away with it. And, everybody's caught up to Chip Kelly. At least in handicapping circles, and guys that I talk to tend to have that firm belief. But then you take a look at what went on there last year, and I don't know that that's necessarily true. They ran the ball extremely well. This is a team that they didn't cover their first game, but then they rattled off 4 straight point spread covers, and they were on their way to 5. Yeah. Except with 16 seconds left, they miraculously get beat by USC, their arch rival, which really that stung to lose that.
It was a wild game. They were up, and yeah, that was unfortunate for them.
They were the better team for the majority of that contest. Then they come back and they lose a double overtime. So you check the total yardage that they averaged last year, well over 400. The rushing yardage, Chip Kelly had that offense humming. And like a lot of teams across America, because of the COVID rule where everybody could come back on a free year if they wanted to, UCLA is one of those teams with a ton of people back, 20 out of 22 starters, which I think is meaningful. It's not always meaningful returning starters, but in their case, I think it's meaningful.
It is. And great point too, right? Because sometimes, especially this year, I was looking at the averages, and it's almost like 17 returning starters on average, which is insane. You never see that because of the COVID year. So kind of to your point, sorry to cut you off, it is important to know who is returning, because if you're returning 20 guys who were 0-11 last year, what does that really say? So anyways, sorry about that. Continue.
Yeah, that's always the way it goes. And what it does, Ben, is getting ready for the season. You keep looking at teams and you go, wow, they're going to be a little better. Wow, they're going to be a little better. Wow, and everybody's going to be a little better, right? But in the end, it's all relevant because
if everyone's better,
right.
Then what,
So I think for UCLA, especially in this game, I'm going to get into Hawaii a little bit here real quick. Todd Graham, second year of his system, his offensive system, their defensive system, and that's usually when you're handicapping football a good sign. You like teams that have a year to acclimate. Second year, they get it better. Hawaii, another team that had no practices last year, obviously, because of coronavirus. There were a couple of quotes I read where they said the bonding experience this year, having spring practice and fall practice, they're already done with fall practice, obviously, was tremendous for this team. Todd Graham spent the summer especially pushing tempo. The way he did at Arizona State. They call it run and gun, right? Everybody has not everybody, but there's a lot of fancy nicknames for offenses across America. This one,
which a lot of times it's the same thing, just with the different name.
Right, just a different moniker for, and this one he calls run and gun, but he wants to push, 15, 16 seconds of play. Let's go, 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 go. And finally, their last practice, he said we had an offensive explosion. Finally, it broke through. And Chevin Cordero, the returning quarterback, looked really, really good. They've got a host of skilled players, as they always do. The offensive line is pretty good. So I think Hawaii's going to be just fine offensively with Graham's second year. The question in this game is real simple. Hawaii's run defense was horrid last year. In fact, the year before they averaged allowing 5 yards per carry, and last year it went up to 5.6. They're undersized, and UCLA wants to run the football. They've got a big offensive line. They've got really good running backs. There's a quote here from Britton Brown, the number one running back for UCLA. Here's what he said a couple of days ago. We have a good game plan going. I'm pretty sure we're going to want to get out there and run on these boys. So you know what Chip Kelly's team wants to do. They're going to try and force Hawaii to stop the run. And, in fact, if Hawaii loads a box against them, 8 men in the box, Dorian Thompson-Robinson has more than enough weapons, and he's more than skilled enough RPO-wise and whatnot to make plays. So UCLA should score points. I looked at this total more than anything right off the bat. It had gotten as high as 69. I think it's back to 68.
Yeah.
In this particular instance, I guess what are you looking at? From an odds maker's perspective, you're looking at something around 42 to 25, 43, 26, I guess is where it would fall. I think it can happen. I think that Hawaii, because there's going to be so many plays in this game, what they're going to try and do, obviously, is they'll run tempo in order to try and wear out UCLA's defensive front on a warm day, get them tired, maybe score back half of the second half. So I think that maybe I'm going to look total here. I can't argue with anybody who pushed it from 11 to 17. That was part of that push toward UCLA, because my power ratings actually thought it should be 15 as an opener.
Yeah, that number was very interesting. I unfortunately missed the mark, and I saw it late. It moved quickly. I think it moved up to 14, 15, and then it stayed there for probably a month or so, and then now it's climbed back up, or climbed even more up. One thing I wanted to point out with this, Rob, and I think this is something good to touch on, because we're going to see this in a few matchups moving forward within the first 3 weeks. A team like UCLA, right? They have a big opponent next week, LSU, right? UCLA doesn't want to open the playbook. They don't want to have to do that. They want to run the ball, like you said. If they can just run the ball and score, they would be very happy with that. That would be perfect. They don't have to touch, some of their more exotic look and their exotic packages. But at the same time, that can hurt a team. And I think when people say look ahead games, and this is like a look ahead spot, I think that has a lot to do with it on how you're prepping schematically. And then, of course, your mentality, right? Where you think that this team, you could just show up and run all over, right? But maybe Hawaii comes and plays. So for me, the biggest lean I would have would be Hawaii first half. I think plus 10 is a decent number to get Hawaii in the first half, kind of based off what I said. But I think throughout the game, it's going to favor UCLA. They're more talented. If they have to stretch the field, they certainly will do so. Larry said Hawaii first half. I like Hawaii first half. I don't know if I'm going to bet it actually, but it has climbed up to plus 10. So that would be my only play that I'm remotely looking at in this one. But I'm high on UCLA, like I said. So I know it kind of contradicts what I have been saying, but I do like the value at plus 10.
Yeah, and the point about look ahead, I'm glad you said that, Ben, because I was asked the same exact question on a show earlier this week. And we take them all situationally, right? There's no blanket statement for these look ahead games. There never is in sports handicapping. You can't, blanket anything. In this particular instance, my personal thought is LSU is a dangerous game for UCLA, obviously, right? I think it's already lined at like 5 points, 4.5 points, whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure. Superbook plus 4. So
plus 4. So
and UCLA would be the home team. So
very, very difficult football game. So if you're UCLA, you can't come out of the chute and lose to Hawaii, because the potential for 0-2 exists right away, which would be disastrous for this team. So you have to come to play. And then you made the point that I would make, that I would hammer home, is that these teams, when we say look ahead, generally that means the team will be vanilla, not show a lot. They don't want to show a lot on film. I don't know what Chip Kelly has left in his arsenal that he hasn't shown over the last 15 years anyway. But if he's holding something back, the ideal situation is to be able to run for 250, 280 yards on an opponent and not have to really show anything exotic. And UCLA in this matchup, fundamentally, that's the one that suits them the best.
Yeah.
So we're going to see, but those look aheads, they'll crop up, as you mentioned, the first 3 weeks and then even into the season. And you just have
Mhm.
to treat them individually. I think UCLA will come to play. Most of these kids are chomping at the bit to get on the field anyway, first time out.
Yeah, Pac-12, I think most teams only played 4 to 5, I believe, because they
Started
didn't.
late last year, yeah.
And some teams had. I don't know about UCLA, but a few teams in the Pac-12 had some cancellations. So I do agree there. These kids are going to be ready to play. So yeah, 17. It's wild. It got that high. It really is. But yeah, we'll see what happens to them. The total is interesting too, but I'm going to stay away. I would lean over, but I'm gonna stay away from that one also. So
I'm going to give you a real quick fun fact here. This has nothing to do with the game. Nothing to do with the game. It's a backup quarterback for Hawaii. The kid's name is Brandon Shager. He's a true freshman. Didn't get in for spring practice because he was still graduating high school. Comes in the summer, and head coach Todd Graham absolutely raves. Said he had as
mhm.
good a camp as anybody there. Already makes veteran reads. Checks out of hot blitzes to the right receiver. We're extremely confident in him. All the accolades that he threw at this kid sounded like if he was there in the spring, he might be your starting quarterback over the incumbent Cordero. But the fun fact about this is when Shager was a kid, 10 years old, he actually beat 8.5 million other people and won the ESPN March Madness bracket contest at 10 years old. So
Wow.
pretty sharp kid at quarterback in the future for Hawaii.
What are the trends with those quarterbacks who've won a ESPN March Madness
Right.
against the spread?
We're going to
Probably
start
0
one.
0, right? We're gonna find out. That's a wild stat. That's insane. 10 years old. Wow. So let's talk about another one. We're going in rotation order here. UTEP versus New Mexico State. So personally, Rob, this is one that I didn't do a deep dive in. Personally, we're showing a line at -10 for UTEP, which I think UTEP's going to be a team that is a little improved. And then against New Mexico State being the home team, line is at 59. This moved from 52.5 at open to 59. What are your thoughts on this one? What are you looking for?
Well, where UTEP is concerned, and again, they're tucked away in Conference USA in games that generally nobody even looks at. Dana Dimmel, the head coach there, now I think fourth or fifth season, maybe fourth season. But another coach who's on the hot seat here. Since he's gotten there, nothing's gone right for Texas El Paso. And we see this a lot in college football when these coaches feel the heat. The first thing they do when they think they might get fired is in the offseason, they fire both coordinators and try something new.
So classic. It's
Yeah.
almost like we can't do the same thing we've done. We're gonna make a move, and they're 5-27 in his tenure. So you have to do something.
And point spread wise, what we're interested in, probably not much better than the 5-27, to tell you the truth. It's not like they've been a
Yeah,
covering machine.
no, they haven't.
But they bring in Dave Warner, Michigan State quarterback coach. They bring in Bradley Dale Pavetto, guy from Texas A&M, was linebackers and special teams coach. Both of these guys, if you just go back in their history, they've got a lot of Power 5 experience. They're in here now. Here's what Dana Dimmel has going for him this year, and this is why this line just keeps moving and moving and moving. By UTEP standards now, we're not trying to make them sound like Alabama, okay? By Conference USA, by UTEP standards, their running backs are tremendous. The best he's had there. His offensive line, Dana Dimmel, for those who don't know, runs a very complex offense that, in his own words, it takes offensive linemen 2 years just to comprehend. He's got a bunch of 3- and 4-year guys now that actually understand blocking assignments, what they're supposed to do. He's very, very confident in like an 8-man rotation up front. So you would think that with their quarterback, Gavin Hardison, developing real well in the spring, according to all reports, as a passer, UTEP finally should be able to put some points on the board. The other side of this coin is New Mexico State and Doug Martin. I feel bad for Doug Martin. You know, he's a great coach, but they're just limited in personnel, right? So they try and
Yeah,
gimmick you. They try to
they're
gimmick
not
you.
getting. They're getting the recruits that couldn't even get into New Mexico. Yeah, they're not getting a lot of talent to come out there.
And to even cap that off, they couldn't get anybody out of the transfer portal, which was loaded with about 900,000 guys.
That's not a good sign.
So they played an FCS 2-game schedule in the spring season, right? They went to FCS, worked as an independent, played a couple of games against teams called Tarleton State out of Texas, who is now moving up to the FCS level, and Dixie State out of Utah, moving up to the FCS level. And at the time, Doug Martin said, we're using these as practice games because his team got depleted. When they opted out of the COVID year last year, the players scattered to other programs, left the team. So not only didn't they get anybody from the transfer portal, they lost their team to the transfer portal. If you check them out, 3 returning starters out of 22 total for this season.
I think that has to be one of the lowest, right?
It's the lowest. I'm thinking it's the lowest I've seen since I've been handicapping, which is a long time. But those kids, all these kids that are going to play this year, all got 2 games worth of experience. That's what they used them for last year. And Doug Martin's team is going to be the same. They're going to throw it around the lot. I will say this, where fundamental football is concerned, Dana Dimel's defense, his new defense is umbrella style. Here's what they want. They want you to go 5, 6, 8 yards, everything underneath. We're going to make you try and earn every chunk of the field, and hopefully you make a mistake on your way to the end zone. What New Mexico State does is a very, very quick-hitting 3-step drop passing attack, really, 3, 5-step. They don't throw 7-step deep. They go quick, quick, quick. If you're in a shell and you're allowing the short stuff, it's what New Mexico State does best. So there's potential there for them to move the football. I think that's what people saw when they pushed this total up, because I think everybody believes Texas El Paso can steamroll New Mexico State's defense just from a physical standpoint. But the other side has to score to get over the number 2. And I think that this matchup kind of lends itself to New Mexico State moving the football here. So maybe, it might be out of reach. Now, when you get into the upper 50s, for those betting totals, 56, 58, 59, those numbers all become key. A lot of final scores land on 58, 59, 56. So you have to be really careful how far you let these numbers go. But I did see some movement last night on this game. El Paso's been a choice of just about everybody. Hey, they have to get off on the right foot. They're the more talented team. They're the deeper team. We'll see how it goes. I didn't play the game, but I would have had some early interest in the game up and over, because I do think Utep probably finds their way to 30+, and New Mexico State always somehow, some way seems to get to the 20-23 mark.
Yeah, I lean with Utep, but I'm not betting this one. They did have a really good performance against North Texas last year, their final game of the season. That was a game that I believe I had money on with North Texas. They lost by 2 to North Texas, but they did look well in that one. But yeah, it's hard to say what's going to happen. I mean, New Mexico State, are they going to come out and play hard, or are they just going to get steamrolled? This could be a live bet spot, Rob. It really could, because if UTEP just starts moving it down the field on these guys, it could be one of those spots where maybe they win by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, little rivalry too, right? It's the battle of I-10. I know in college basketball, these 2 teams play each other twice in the non-conference. So certainly kids will be fired up because it is some a rivalry of sorts. But we'll see. Like you say, New Mexico State becomes a mystery, Ben. You really don't know what to expect of a team that played 2 FCS spring practice games in essence and has 3 kids back and really didn't upgrade. It's like I say, it depends on the coaching and the X's and O's, how far they go, and are they good. Sometimes you can't out-scheme a better side. In fact, most times you can't out-scheme a better opponent. So
yeah, especially in college when you have a huge talent gap. I totally agree there. Speaking of scheming some talent, we got Fresno State against Uconn. For those of you who do college or follow college football, you do know Uconn is bottom of the barrel here, and that's a reason why Fresno State's favored by 25 points here. Actually, it's up to 27.5, 28. Do you see, Rob? It looks like it opened at 25. No surprise that it's moved up. I almost feel like if this would open up at 28, it might have moved up to 30 just because it's UConn. Maybe it's hard to say, but of course this is a fade UConn play more than anything with this line move. Fresno State is a decent team. Totals at 62.5. You laying the points there?
I think I would probably wait and potentially take Ben. I haven't done anything. The first 31 years of my life, I lived in Connecticut. I'm close to the program. I know a lot of people
Well,
who went
I'm
to
sorry.
UConn and
I was
whatnot.
I was
No, no,
talking
no.
bad about your Huskies.
The um, the Randy Edsall re-entrance, right? I mean, he took this team to
Mhm.
the. It's hard to believe he took this team to the Orange Bowl maybe a decade ago.
Yeah.
Maybe just a shade more, and then he returned. I thought they'd never forgive him and let him back in the door, but he's back in the door. They took the entire year last year off. What they did with that year after what was a disastrous football season, right? 2019 was a mess. Was they went to the weight room and they just went for physical strength. They worked on executing offensive and defensive systems. And to all accounts that I can gather, they're a better football team. Now, better is a relative term, right? When you're as bad as UConn was, better can only mean so much. And you're going to have to face, again, we're talking about a Fresno State team that's in the second season of Kalen DeBoer's overall system, his offense and plus the defensive system. Kalen DeBoer is a fantastic offensive coordinator, one of the younger offensive masterminds in college football. Did it at Fresno State a few years back under Jeff Tedford, went to Indiana, worked with Tom Allen, led that offense with Michael Penix Jr., then bolted back to Fresno State to take the head coaching job. In his first year, bringing his system to Fresno State, in his first year, they threw for 356 yards a game.
Mhm.
It's relevant because if there's a weakness on UConn, it's that secondary. I mean, they do have more depth on the defensive front. They do have more strength and depth in the linebacking core, but their secondary still remains a mess with only one real experienced guy. So when you're facing an offense that throws for 356 when they really don't know what they're doing, I can only imagine what's going to happen to UConn defensively here if they don't get to the quarterback. And DeBoer's schemes generally don't allow the quarterback to get touched. Offensive line is really good here. And on top of that, they've got a workhorse running back. Reggie Rivers is one of the best in the Mountain West. So all that being said, Fresno State's going to score. I wouldn't be surprised if they get over 40 in this game. Your question's going to be at 27.5. That, UConn still probably only has to get to 17.
Yeah.
And
This could hit,
they're
yeah.
right in the game, right? And
Yeah.
I think with their quarterback, they have, for those who do tune into this, and Ben, this is a weird start time. I mean, I looked at this 2-3 times. 2:00 East, and it's in Fresno, so it's an 11 a.m. Pacific time start, which is kind of crazy. But I think
Is that TV or no?
it's got to be TV related. Was the
Who's
only
air?
thing I
Who's
could think
who's
of
who wants to air that game?
at 11 a.m. Right?
Yeah, what's going on there?
But the good news for these kids is they've known this since the schedule came out. So I'm sure that the coaches will have them go through some sort of prep where they're ready,
Yeah,
wake up.
that's very true. It's not second, third game. They've probably already been discussing walkthroughs and the schedule, which is big. That's actually a really good point. When you have those one-off time slots within the season, you definitely can have some lackadaisical first, second quarters of a game, but maybe not in this one. We'll see.
And in UConn's case, you can accommodate your air travel if you want to get there a day early. It's not like you must play a Saturday game and you can't fly until Sunday night. If Randy Edsall wants to get them there early to get them acclimated to West Coast time, he can do so in this particular instance. So I think the time, even though it's weird, might not have as big of an effect on this game as it would some others that we may look for during the season here. If you're watching UConn, just watch Kevin Mensah. Their running back, if Kevin Mensah was a running back anywhere else, he would have a lot more notoriety than he has in Storrs, Connecticut, because they just don't make the big screen very often. So he'll be a guy where they can run. They're going to try a lot of play action. They've got tight ends. And again, Fresno State's defense wasn't that great, to tell you the truth, Ben, last year, and they can be nicked for 2020. You fear a backdoor touchdown in this game. I'll say this.
I was just going to say that. This seems like a backdoor not only to UConn covering, but also to hitting the over. It has those feels in this one.
Yeah, because what if you're 45-17 in the fourth, and Fresno is let off the accelerator, and UConn's not going to, because all reports, at least early on, are that they're very, very motivated. Now, that motivation could be killed if they start 0-6. Second half of the season, we may not be talking about a motivated team. But right now, everybody believes they're good. First game of the year, right? Hey, we're pretty good. And at 45-17, you're covering with Fresno, and, Uconn gets a backdoor touchdown, 45-24. You're right. Uconn wins. The game goes over. So that's all very, very possible. I think I would prefer to take points in this instance, and I think I would prefer to look over the total just because Fresno State should roll. And I got a little faith in UConn to put some points on the board here. They're not going to be just a handed-off style team this year.
Yeah, I kind of like the angle there with the over. It makes a lot of sense. It comes down to if UConn can score 20. I think if UConn can score 21-24, this game might go over. They have the capability. It's going to come down to that fourth quarter. Can they get some weak coverages and just some third stringers on Fresno State's end and drive the ball down the field, which that's why a lot of backdoor covers happen with these point spreads 20 plus. So definitely watch out for that. And if it does happen, Rob and I tried to warn you because it's everyone's always sitting there. They're like, "Oh, come on, that shouldn't have happened." And I was like, "Hey, we told you what there was going to be third stringers on defense, so it happens quite a bit." Any last words with this one?
And especially at home, Ben, when you can expand your roster, the home team, the travel team can only take a certain amount of players with them.
Oh, that's
a
great point.
The sidelines are loaded with third and fourth, and your family's there, and coach lets you in because you're up by 4 touchdowns.
Fans are back in the crowd.
Sure.
That's a very good point. That is a very good point. Yeah. So this is we'll call this one the backdoor cover territory. Mark that one. All right. We have one final game to cover. This one isn't on a lot of sports books currently, with one of the teams being a FCS conference team, but we should see some more lines come out very soon for this one. It's Southern Utah versus San Jose State. We definitely have to cover it because San Jose State is a team that needs to be talked about, and they have a big matchup next week with USC, which is a game a lot of people have been talking about, and a lot of people forget that San Jose State has a week 0 game. Southern Utah is a interesting team coming out of the Big Sky. They played a season last year in spring. Some of the Big Sky teams did this. Some opted out. That could actually benefit Southern Utah by having some of those games versus a spring season. I think it is a little bit of an added benefit, but this San Jose State team is very good. Let's talk about them. Lines at -22, favored, of course, to the Spartans of San Jose State. I'm showing a 56 here for a total.
Yeah, and this one could be one of those that you mentioned earlier, Ben, that could be look ahead. I don't even want to say look ahead, but I would say second half, we're just going to let off the gas if you're San Jose State, right? And you have USC on deck. Let's not show anymore. But you're right. What Brett Brennan has done with this program, which was in the junkyard, basically, when he got there.
They were like teams we've been discussing, like a New Mexico State. You could say they were, in that position just a few years back.
Absolutely. And they made strides originally on the offensive side. But the defensive side came along last year, too. And again, it's a team with 19 starters back and all the motivation in the world against an FCS team in Southern Utah, which they do have a nice offense. I mean, as a guy who follows, bets, handicaps, FCS, Southern Utah's a good offense. But they're way overmanned physically in this particular game by this team as Brett Brennan continues to build depth, which is something that San Jose State sorely lacked when he first got there. The 2-quarterback system. Hey, listen, we all remember Nick Starkel quarterbacking at Mississippi State and then going to Arkansas. And I think San Jose State, this particular team that he plays for, now picked them off 5 times in a game a couple years back. But Starkel and Nick Nash make up a 2-headed quarterback duo where you got one that's a thrower, one that's a runner, and they're just difficult to defend. They've got wide receivers, they've got running backs, but the real key to them is the fact that the defense showed such progress last year and continues to get better. That's scary for the Southern Utah side because really they bring an offense to the table, and that's about it. So can they even penetrate this defense? I'm not sure. I think 22 in this instance. To me, originally it looks small. But I do, again, we're frightened of what might happen in the fourth quarter here, right?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely. It's another questionable what's going to happen in the fourth, because San Jose State could be up like 40-0. Like that would not surprise me.
right.
40-7, maybe something like that. And then all of a sudden you get some last second scores or whatever it may be with some of the backups. But to the point about the two quarterback system, it is interesting because if San Jose State does get up and they're up, let's say 4 touchdowns, sometimes you do see the secondary guy get a little more time than if it was just a one quarterback system. And then the second guy who's not on the same level comes up. But we know that second guy, whoever it is, he's going to come in and he's going to play hard as hell. So there no letting up the gas for him, but it's the limitation from the coaching perspective, right? Do they just run right, run left, see if you can get some yards, up 28 points, right?
Well, and the great news for San Jose State is that Nick Nash just isn't your ordinary number 2 quarterback. I mean, he's number 2 because Starkel's there and he's the thrower, but Nash has started games over the past 2 years. They have had design packages in that offense for him for 2 years because he's the RPO guy, the run guy. So if he's the quarterback, you're still very, very confident that San Jose State can continue to score. It's whether or not he puts bubble wrap, he being Brett Brennan, puts bubble wrap on both quarterbacks and says, okay, time to see what we have behind you two, which is what you would fear in the fourth. But, if you bet San Jose State, you want the exact situation that you laid out. You want them to be 40-7, up by 5 touchdowns. So, we can give up 1 backdoor touchdown and still be safe. But you have to be up by that amount. This team could be. They really could be, because I think they can even score off of their defense in this instance.
Yeah, strip sack,
something,
pick six.
Right.
Yeah, because they're ball hawks, and I think that's what they brought to the table there with the new coaching staff. They want to wreak havoc, disrupt the game, and score on the defensive side of the ball.
Totally agree.
Yeah. My lean here, I guess, would be San Jose State. It's pretty square, but we'll see what happens there. For me, week 0 overall, not going to have a lot of action. I missed some key numbers earlier in the summer. For example, UCLA, wish I could have got them under 2 touchdowns. But, that's the thing with these week 0 games. You got to get in early, as you said, right?
Yeah, when the odds makers have them up on the board that early, the bigger money is going to take advantage of it right away. Those guys are just waiting around in June.
They're not at the beach. Well,
right,
if they are at the beach,
right.
They're on their phones.
Right.
But yeah, and maybe you were at the beach on your phone. But I know what you're saying. Their focus is on those numbers come out, where the betting public in the summers, they're watching baseball, and
absolutely.
then it comes into August. Now they're like, oh, all right, let's start to look at it. And then finally, here we are, and now the public is all over it. So yeah, totally agree there. We had one question about Arizona and their win total, under 2.5 wins. Could you do a brief preview about that? Well, he already made the bet, so we'll be honest, because you can't take it back now. There should be a segment, Rob, called "Roast My Bet." That would be fun. I am very down on Arizona, and I think the team is down on themselves. I don't think there's a lot of upside to this team. They have a very tough schedule. Yeah, that's what I'm going to say about Arizona. So I would lean under 2.5 wins as well.
I actually, Ben, and you see me scrambling here. I'm one of those guys who still hand writes notes after all these years. I just feel pen to paper. I understand it better.
They've done studies, Rob. When you write something down on pen and paper, it retains in your brain longer. So you're onto something there.
Yeah, I agree. But that makes me our comment here, DGN Jazz. I made the same bet, and that's why I was scrambling for my notes, because I brought him to the show, Arizona under 2.5. Listen, my particular reasons, I don't I'm not really fond of Jed Fish as a college football head coach. He's an NFL guy where complex offensive systems generally work a little bit better. The NFL players understand at that level. This guy's been some places where his kids couldn't understand what the heck he was asking them to do. Minnesota especially was one. And you're going to come in here and you take over a Kevin Sumlin system, right, which is totally different than what this particular head coach preaches. New coordinators on both sides. When you look through their schedule, and maybe our viewer who asked the question here has already done so, you find one win automatically. You say
Northern
they're going to win
Arizona.
that game. Yeah, they're going to win that
That's
game.
it.
And if you can find two more, I'd be very, very surprised. I mean, you have to get the 3 to win the bet. I couldn't find two more, so I did make the bet. I bet Arizona under 2.5. So we're in the same boat. I hope we both win.
Yeah, I'm looking at their schedule. I mean,
It's tough.
No favors here. You get BYU and San Diego State back to back. I mean, those are two of the more physical teams in college football. Sure, you know, get a win against Northern Arizona, which you still shouldn't overlook them. But you know, for the sake of this, we'll say that's a win. Then you got to go to Eugene. I mean, they're going to start 1-3. They would have to steal a win from Colorado, but playing in Folsom, as you know, in the altitude, that's no easy task. Colorado's going to be favored, I think, by a touchdown at least in that one. Maybe you steal one from Cal, but yeah, to get 3 wins, I do not see that. I think two is kind of their ceiling for me. I just don't see it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the bad part about them having BYU and San Diego State right off the bat is that that's when you're still learning. You know, Grant Cannell, their quarterback from last year, transferred out. So they're just so brand new, Ben, and brand new to what is being taught to them. And a lot of coaches will simplify just to get a team out on the field and say, you know, it'll be a 2-year project. But Jed Fish throws a lot at you in a short period of time, and I could just see this team, you know, getting beaten by San Diego State, BYU pretty badly. If they lose some faith in themselves 4 games into the Pac-12 season, you could totally forget them. You know, you're supposed to progress and get a little better by the end of the year, and maybe they will. But everybody else in that league will be better by the end of the year, too. So I don't see them getting 3 wins. I really don't.
Yeah, and to play BYU game 1, you know,
that's tough.
Guys coming back from mission trips. There's grown men on that team, and that's not a ideal opener. I'm curious if there's I think the lines are up for that one. I'm just curious. No, maybe not for BYU Arizona. Do you see a number for that one?
I'm going to look right now with you.
Oh, I do. I see.
You got it?
Wow, only minus 11.5. That's interesting. It's on the road. Well, it's at home for Arizona. I'm a little surprised that isn't higher. And I would say, Rob, if you like that number, correct me if I'm wrong, you should probably grab it. I could see that going up.
Absolutely. And it's due. I can tell you exactly why it is, because I know a lot of guys who do their own power ratings, a couple of bookmakers when they power rated. It's the Zach Wilson effect. They downgraded BYU so badly because Zach Wilson is now a New York Jet.
Yeah.
But the actual fact of the matter is there's 62 returning lettermen to BYU. So, yes, we lost our quarterback, but we didn't lose hardly anybody from that team. So they played a lousy schedule last year. We all remember how they waltzed to that spotless 8-0 until they hit Coastal Carolina. We remember that.
Yeah.
And they didn't
let up any point in any of those games. I mean, I remember, I think it was it Army that they played early in the season? Maybe it was
Navy, I think.
Navy, that's right.
Yeah.
And this was one I just always remembered because I live bet it too. And then a guy, Brad Powers, who I respect, he bet it like 7 times because, you know, they don't take the foot off the gas. Those guys, they get better as the game goes on, the way they play physical football. They won that one 55-3. I'm not saying they're going to blow out Arizona 55-3, but this is a team that's going to come in, and I would not be surprised, Rob, if that gets to 14 by next week. I would not be shocked.
You're right. I think you're right.
We have one last question, actually 2 more, and then we'll hop off here at the top of the hour real quick. LSU over 8 wins. And someone also said the LSU UCLA matchup. Let's not get too much into that just because I want to see what UCLA does first in their game. Not that we're going to take away a lot from that, but I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. But LSU, 8 wins for that program. That's that's not very high. What are your thoughts there on the Tigers in the SEC?
Well, I think the potential's there. It's one of those mysteries again because Ed Ogeron has gone back to what he knows best, what they did in 2019. Went back. Coordinators gone. We're going back to the system that we had with Joe Burrow and Joe Brady. He brought in a Joe Brady assistant to coach the offense, and they did the same on defense. They're going to be aggressive again. And the talent level is always there, Ben. They didn't really get beat up in recruiting.
No,
So
they're
have
still getting
ton of
the
players.
recruits. I mean, yeah, you bring those guys into the stadium at night. I mean, it's hard to walk away and say no to a scholarship if they're offering you, and if you do, you're probably going to Bama. I mean,
Right, one or the other.
Yeah,
And
so
they've got a little chip on their shoulder. They did lose their starting quarterback, right? Brennan got hurt, so he won't start the season. But then again, Brad Johnson's son, Max, quarterbacked a lot of last season as well, so he's in. So, I think they've got the potential. I kind of side with them doing well this year. Not something I am totally plunged in on, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if LSU makes their way back in the SEC West this year. Not to beat Alabama, but right back up the ladder. I know a lot of people are preaching Texas A&M. To me, LSU on talent alone is as good as Texas A&M, and if things break right, could be even better.
yeah, that is interesting. It seems like Texas A&M is getting more hype than LSU this season, which we probably haven't seen in a while since maybe Johnny Football. Maybe, but okay. Last one. You can discuss whichever one you want to talk about here. Buffalo over 7 was one, and then UConn under 2.5. I guess we kind of touched on that, and Duke over. Let's talk about Duke if you don't mind. Over 3.5, because this is a team that. Very interesting. It seems like they're not, we talked earlier about teams that maybe could exceed expectations and maybe you could get some good numbers on earlier in the season. Do you think Duke fits that, or are you down on the Blue Devils?
Well, he's so light on talent this year, David Cutcliffe. Generally, I'd always defer to David Cutcliffe. He's been such a good coach for so many years. But what works against them real quick here, Ben, it's the only team in that Coastal Division that doesn't have a returning quarterback. That's a division full of right on down the line, Miami of Florida, Pittsburgh, blah, blah, blah. They all have returning quarterbacks. They don't. The defensive line and the defensive backfield got depleted, and it's a bad combination, DL and secondary, in a league where you've got so many returning quarterbacks, or at least in a division we have so many returning quarterbacks. You're probably not going to be able to rush. And you're probably not going to be able to cover. So I'm not really there on Duke. Somebody said Buffalo and the 7. That team, really quick, guys, is decimated. Lance Leipold got the late call to Kansas, took his whole coaching staff with him.
Lost the running back.
Yeah, 20 kids left that team as soon as he left. So Buffalo is not what Buffalo was last year. They won't resemble
and Rob, that's the downside with this transfer portal. I'll be completely honest, if guys at Buffalo have a chance to potentially go to a bigger school and maybe they're sacrificing more time, but you could go to a more premier school. And then once one guy leaves, maybe he's a leader and then, or same position, it kind of starts to spread. Right. And it was kind of based off of the coaching change, but we're seeing that a lot now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. This was great. Let everyone know where they can find you, where they can find your work, and anything else you'd like to share.
Yeah, real quick, you can find me on videos like this each and every day at wagertalk.com. Wagertalk.com, you go sign up. It's a free sign up. I would encourage anybody. All it takes is your email address. You'll have access to a ton of free content. If you're interested in selection packages, my selections are also up for sale at wagertalk.com. If you want to find me on Twitter, it's real easy. It's at Rob Veno Sports. I randomly tweet every now and again when I'm not consumed with work, so you can find some of my inner thoughts during games on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports.
Hey, Twitter's a great place to do that at. Yeah, there's going to be some bad beats, and we can let them air out on Twitter.
Stomp our feet a little.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Maybe we'll do this again. It was great, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Ben. It was fun.
Yep. All right. We'll see you guys later.